Hey everybody, it's Scott O'Motto back for another Minecraft video. Hope everybody's having a great day, guys. I'm having a great day. In this video, we want to use Optifine, but instead of using it to increase performance, which is what a lot of videos do, including some of my own, we want to use it to try to get maximum quality, all right? And so we are going to use the MSI Afterburner software, all right? So I'll put it up on the display here, and you can see it in the top left-hand corner. And we're going to use the Riva Tuner Statistics Server along with it. That is a piece of software that's installed with it. By the way, I have a video on my channel about how to configure it for Minecraft if you're interested. I'll leave a link in the description. But we have an RTX 3070 GPU and an Intel i9-10900F CPU. All right, so what we want to do is test our frames, and I get a lot of frames that I can burn, all right, that I can get rid of. So we're going to try to get maximum quality with Optifine. All right, so of course the very first thing we want to do is we want to go into unlimited frame rate. So if you're getting low frame rates, guys, be sure to test that. So I'm going to go into first person here, and then I will toggle on the statistics server to see that I'm getting about 1100 frames a second, 1200 frames a second here in spawn chunks in this planes. All right, so this will give an average. If you look at the bottom line there, it's saying labeled average, then it's the minimum frame rate, the average frame rate, and the maximum frame rate. So our average is 1245 right now. All right, so let's go back into Optifine, and I do have I'm going to toggle it off here for a moment. I do have all of the default settings right now. So these are default Optifine settings. I'll just go over them quickly. But by the way, if you don't know, when it says default here, that is tied to your settings of fancy or fast or whatever. So if you set fast, then default for those other ones would be fast as well. All the animations are on. Here's the quality settings, and here's the performance settings, okay? So the next change that we want to make for this test, and we'll have to switch this, we're not going to use resource packs or third-party shaders, but we will use the internal shader. But until we use the internal shader, we can test with fabulous graphics, all right, and see how that affects our frame rates. All right, so we were getting around 1200 frames a second or so. So let's reset it and see that now we've dropped below 1000. All right, so here at this 8 render distance, I'm getting just below 1000 with fast or fancy graphics. So it dropped me down 200 frames or so at least. All right, so that's something to take note of. All right, so another thing we want to do is we want to up the render distance. All right, and see what that does to our frame rate. I think 14 is an ideal setting, and I'll explain why here in a minute, but let's let the world redraw around us. All right, and with this statistics server, when you make a big change, you want to reset it so you can get a good range to reset your highs and lows. All right, so we're getting about 600 and something frames a second now, which is, you know, what, a loss of maybe about 300 frames by doing that. All right, but we're still in a good range. If I could get around 200 or so, then I would be happy because I'd have enough headroom to play the world. All right, so let's turn this off real quick. Now let's go ahead and get out of spawn chunks. Let's sprint out of spawn chunks. I guess we could put up the server so that we could monitor the frame rates as we move along, and let the world redraw a little bit so we can see new chunks being generated. Because if you don't know, in your spawn chunks, there's 12 chunks that are generated. So when a new world's created, part of the time of its loading is creating these new chunks. All right, so we want to see how our chunks are loading at 14 render distance. Now notice I saw trees and stuff that popped on. See, I'm seeing stuff redraw in the background. All right, now I don't want that. That, to me, that breaks immersion. I used to have to play on 8 render distance, and so I would always see this. Now we're going to try to eliminate that because we have frames to spin. So here in Optifine, we're going to go to the performance tab, and again, I'll get off the server because that one line's in the way. And we'll look at the performance tab, and under chunk updates here, all right, if you read about it, it says 1 is slower world loading, higher FPS. 5 is fastest world loading, lowest FPS. the number of chunk updates per rendered frame. All right, so we want to set that to its maximum of 5. So now we'll get 5 chunk updates per rendered frame. All right, and let's see if that helps to eliminate seeing the chunks, and let's see how it affects our frame rates. All right, so we're at about 680, around there, really basically where we were before. I did still see some chunks draw there in the distance. Let's see if that continues. Yes, I do still see those. Okay, I don't want that. I don't want to see chunks like that draw in the distance if I can help it. All right, so let's just continue to move forward and just see if the world was just catching up or whatever. It's not affecting our frame rates much, this setting in particular. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with that. That's fine. Let's, be sure we're going into new chunks. And I am talking about on the ground, sprinting even, but not necessarily flying, because flying, you're probably always, but you can see not much of that mountain drew in as we were going. I'm seeing more of it here, but we want it to kind of be revealed rather than be blocks popping in. All right, and fog helps do that. All right, so let's go back to our video settings and performance, and first of all, let's turn on smart animations, but let's turn on render regions. All right, and again, we're trying for maximum quality, but smart animations will hide the stuff that's not on the screen, like flowing water and fire and stuff like that. And we might as well put on fast math. It's kind of like better FPS, where it optimizes the shape of the waveform. All right, so we can do fast render right now, but we won't be able to do it with the shader enabled. All right, so let's go ahead and reset, and you can see now making those 2 settings popped us pretty much back up to a pretty good amount of frames. All right, so 600 and something frames with fabulous graphics. Not a problem. Now, do we see chunks loading in the distance? See, they're fading in with fog, and that's good. That's kind of what I want to see. I do like the fog effect. Let me just fly through here. I like the fog effect, but I don't want it to be too prominent. All right, so I'm not wanting to see chunks draw, like blocks pop up and stuff. I'd like to see them emerge out of the fog. All right, that's kind of what we're going for here. Let's see, my frame rates are about back up to 1,000 in this plains biome. All right, around 800, 1,000 sprinting. I did have a little lag spike right there that I noticed. Okay, so still plenty of frames to spend, and I'm getting more of that feeling of the chunks fading out of the fog rather than me seeing them draw. All right, me seeing them draw in the screen, and that's ideal. So let's increase the beauty of the fog. So if I go under quality here, you can see that fog. Oh, it's not in quality then, it's in details. Fog is set to fast by default. Let's go ahead and take that up to fancy. All right, and we're at maximum fog distance. So we'll want to do that. Keep that at maximum setting. But the fog fancy should give us a little bit more details rather than like a white block. The fast fog creates basically a white thing. We could see more details in that tree and stuff off in the distance. So let's sprint a little bit into some new chunks and see if we're getting the intended effect of things emerging from the fog. All right, see, like that right there, I did not see that draw. It's like emerging from the fog. Now it's got depth to it. See, and it's more emerging from the fog than it is drawing on the screen. And especially I don't want to see blank floating chunk areas that get drawn in. Okay, so that fancy fog didn't affect me very much as far as frame rates. I'm still at about 800 or so in a forest. All right, so I'm happy with that. All right, so let's see, under the performance, we pretty much got all the settings that I would want to make. Smooth FPS will actually reduce my frame rate quite a bit, but there'll be less of a range of it. All right, so let's take a look at that. So it drops me about 300 frames, but they shouldn't pop around. There shouldn't be as high or low of a setting in general. Okay, now again, if I turn that off, then I should see more of a range of frame rates from high to low. Let's reset that, but higher overall frame rates. All right, so I'm seeing about 100 or so difference, 200 difference in those frames, but I get an overall composite more frames. So I'm going to accept not having that smooth FPS on. All right, because it's actually not benefiting me. I'm not seeing lag spikes or anything like that that I need to smooth out. All right, so let's move higher up in the world, and you can see all these chunks were already drawn as I came in. That's what I want to see. All right, so we pretty much have maxed that how we want to go. I'm going to turn off this for a second. All right, so let's go and look then at the details. We pretty much are all at max. All right, all by setting the default for that, everything here is maxed out except for biome blend. All right, now entity distance I'm not going to really mess with. It modifies the maximum distance with the entities are shown. Not really interested in changing that. But this biome blend, it smooths the color transition between biomes. 5x5 is normal, default 15x15 is maximal blending. Higher values may generate significant lag spikes and slow down the chunk loading speed. All right, let's see if that's true. So we'll take it up to maximum. Now notice the one below it is show off. So we're going to go to maximum and we'll see what the difference is. So let's bring up our frame rates and see how that affects us. Okay, so really not at all so far. Let's let some new chunks load. It says it's slowed chunk loading speed potentially. So let's test that to see how that works for us. All right, so we'll just continue to sprint forward here a little bit and try to get into an area where we can see more of the world. All right, right around here. So you can see those chunks were already loaded as we popped in. That's what I want to see. I want to see that, and even off in the distance, they're hidden within the fog. That's not a problem. Every chunk here was already preloaded and ready for us to go, and we're actually getting very good frame rates. So let's check the biome blending. Let's go from maybe this swamp to this plains and see if we can see a biome blend there. Yeah, we have to look for an area that's suitable to show it so that we can tell what's going on. Let's try go back to the extreme hills and find an area that would transition between that potentially. We need a changing grass colors and stuff like that. It may be hard to find a spot like right offhand that'll demonstrate that. All right. Savanna is ideal. Like if you could find a transition between a savanna. I'm gonna go ahead and actually I'm going to show you that you can use Optifine, if you didn't know, to turn off the daylight cycle. Let's do that. Let's set day only. Done. There. Okay, and so that'll just have it as day. Here's a blending biome a little bit right here. Let's test the difference. All right, so if I go back to options, then I go to the details and I set it back to its default. Okay, yeah, it's much more patchy, like right around there. You can see it's a lot more patchy. So let's set it back to the high setting. See what we get. Yeah, so much smoother. You're not seeing this block patching area. Not the most perfect way to display it, but you know, you've got to work with what you got when you're given a seat. All right, so we'll accept that. That did not seem to affect our frame rate significantly. We're still at about 800 or so, something around there. All right, so now we've pretty much covered those Optifine settings. So let's start to look at some of the internal shader. All right, so if I turn off Fabulous Graphics, back to fast or back to fancy, let's get us a new composite reading of that. All right, so I've turned off the Fabulous and I'm at 800, around 800. So Fabulous wasn't affecting us as much with these new settings. like the smart animations and stuff like that. Okay, but let's go and again, I'll turn this off. I have to keep switching back and forth just to keep it out of our way. But if I go to shaders and turn on the internal shader here, all right, then it provides an internal one to Optifine, and then you get some settings available to you: anti-aliasing, render quality, shadow quality. All right, let's see what anti-aliasing does for us. But to really utilize it and see it, we're going to want to go under quality, and we're going to change our map. All right, levels. Now, anisotropic filtering, however you say that, is not available in this version, I don't think. Neither is anti-aliasing. It's available in the shader. But we'll change this map type from nearest, which is the rough smoothing, fastest, linear normal smoothing, bilinear fine smoothing, trilinear finest. Let's change it to the highest one. I'll click onto the left side because the world will redraw every time you reset it. So we want to go all the way to the end before we click to reset it to trilinear. Okay, now this should be the top amount of maps available. So maps, they smooth visual effects, make distant objects look better by smoothing the texture details. All right, so minimum smoothing when it's one level, maximum smoothing. The default is maximum smoothing, but off in the distance now, we should see less vibration in textures. Things should be clearer, have less noise essentially to them. And so they should be, you know, a crisper image basically. And you can see things are fading into the fog. Now these are drawn chunks already, so it's not going to be as prominent of an effect. But let's try to get to some new chunks. We may have to fly a little bit further. I think I saw some new chunks pop in back there, but it may not be quite as obvious now what's new chunks and what's not. With these settings. All right, I see new chunks generating there. And again, at flying distance, things will probably pop in. But at walking and sprinting distance, I don't want them to. I'm trying to avoid that. Now, I could increase render distance, which would push it further, but I actually like this fringe fog effect. If I push 14 beyond, you can see just beyond the level of my view there, I'm getting fog off in the furthest distance, and I like that. I do like that effect, and that's true to nature. All right, so let's go back to the shaders again. Now that we've set the maps to where anti-aliasing may benefit us more. So there's several levels of it. Jagged lines, and it smooths jagged lines and sharp color transitions. It's faster than traditional anti-aliasing and compatible with shaders. So it uses FXAA. All right, we'll set it to its maximum, which I believe is 4 times. All right, and let's see how that affects our frames. So let's call back up this and reset the server. Okay, so now we're down to 600. So changing the maps and enabling anti-aliasing cost us a couple hundred frames, basically. But again, we have frames to spend, so I don't mind that. If I can get a better looking world, that's what we're trying to go for. So I should, now this, let's say that the Minecraft texture pack is 16 pixel resolution. So you're not going to get a whole lot of detail that would create vibrating lines and stuff like that. Sometimes in your trees and stuff you will. We want to see if there's vibration in the trees. I could see maybe a little bit of color vibration if I'm being real sensitive about it. Yeah, slight. And you know, I don't know if we can make settings that could fix that. All right, so we didn't lose many frames a second doing that. So let's go back to the shaders, and now let's up the render quality. And again, the render quality is not going to make a big difference. Let's take it to its max. It's at 1 times by default. We'll take the shadow quality all the way up too. Now stuff like hand depth is not going to matter. It's how far your hand's away. Old hand light default shows shader packs, which only, you know, this only affects shader packs. It's not going to really matter for us. But let's see what that did to our frame rates. Now, surprisingly, our frame rates actually increase. All right, increase. Now, I've seen this in other world settings, and it is in fact something that happens, all right, in my particular CPU GPU setup. And then the reason is because now I start to use the GPU more over the CPU. All right, so this is something to keep in mind, guys, is I'm upping the quality of the render, but again, at 16 pixels, it's not going to matter that much as far as the visual look, but it does actually help me to achieve a higher frame rate. All right, let's look at this mountain off in the distance and see what it does. So it's drawing in as depth, which is fine. That's not a problem. It's not drawing in as blocky chunks. All right, but let's take a look and see that if I turn off the shader, all right, let's watch here to see that this RTX 3070 right now, I'm using about 85–89% of it. All right, if I go in here and I turn off the shader, all right, let's turn that off real quick and let it redraw. Okay, so all right, I'm not getting yet a lower frame rate. I'm back up to 1,000, but I'm using 55% of the GPU. All right, 55% of it. Whereas if I enable the shader, it'll use more of the GPU, about 20–30% more from my tests. Okay, so see, I'm up at 70, 74, around that area. So it's pushing more processing off into the GPU, which again, depending on your configuration, could be very useful for you to get a higher performance, you know, using that powerful GPU. So we're back up at 1,000, guys, basically where we started, even making the maximum settings. All right, so then of course you could have your frames to spend on high resolution resource packs, on actual shaders, third-party shaders, but we have pretty much maxed out the quality that's available to us at default 16 pixel resolution. There is one more setting that you could make if you use it along with your graphics card, and I'll probably go into settings where we do some of this stuff, maybe try the anisotropic filtering or whatever on the graphics card and stuff. But an additional setting that you can make if you enable it on your graphics card using a thing called DSR is you can get higher resolution. So I could get 4K resolution on this 1080p display, and it would be scaled down, but it would be crisper and sharper at high detail texture packs. See, I don't think 4K for Minecraft makes that much sense if you're using the default resource packs. I mean, if you're using high resolution resource packs, then potentially, but you're just going to lose performance if you're using huge resource packs and then, you know, trying to run those at 4K. So I'm not when I built this computer, I built it for 1080p. But anyway, guys, let me just go over those settings real quick, just so everybody could see what we did as a recap. I could go higher render distance if I wanted, and you spend some of the frames on that. But we've got graphics fancy. We didn't change any of that. Under details, I upped the fog to fancy, and then I changed the biome blend. These were the only settings that I was interested in changing. Everything else is already at its highest values anyway, and some of that depends on the resource pack. Under quality, this is all resource pack stuff. There's really nothing for us to change except for the bitmap levels, which we set to their highest level of trilinear. All right, and then under the performance tab, we put on render regions, which allows faster terrain mapping by optimizing the GPU load, more effective at higher render distance, so it loads regions of chunks. And then we have our chunk updates set all the way up to 5. So 5 chunks are drawing per render cycle, and that's helping us to have the world pop on faster, and it didn't affect our frame rates in the end. Well, once we had smart animations, lazy chunk loading, smooth world, fast math, those settings, okay? And then under the shaders, we upped it to its max with the anti-aliasing FXAA 4 times, render quality 2 times, shadow quality 2 times. Again, I'm not convinced that this is going to make a difference in 16 times resource packs, the default resource pack, but enabling the shaders and then enabling this pushes some onto our GPU. All right, so let's bring back up the thing and get a kind of final look at our frame rates. Down to 600, 640, 700, around there, 800. So, you know, of course it varies as you are in different terrain and such and moving around. But yeah, about 750. So generally from our base, we may have spent 300 or 400 frames overall in our production. I'm also recording video, so that matters as well. But we are getting the effect that we achieve, and so I'm happy with that, guys. Guys, I hope this was helpful to you to kind of do the reverse of what a lot of videos do, which is go for the highest quality settings that we can use in Optifine, spending extra frames. So you may want to look into some of these settings if you have extra frames. Anyway, this is Scott Amato. Leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, guys. I'd love to hear your comments. In future videos, we'll look at resource packs and some of the GPU settings. I have an Nvidia, you know, obviously RTX 3070, so we'll be using the Nvidia control panel for stuff and all that. Anyway, if you like it, let me know. Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.